This is your installation guide for the Hornblasters Dixie Horn. This is everything you need for the install process. You gotta have the Dixie Horn, of course. You gotta have some 10 gauge terminals, quick connections, and just normal connections. And then to keep everything watertight, you're gonna want some heat shrink with a lighter and some crimps so you could do some wiring stuff.
Make sure you stay tuned because in this video I will teach you a cheap but professional looking way to mount your Dixie Horn without needing to drill into your vehicle. I always like to tackle wiring first, but before we start wiring, it's important to know what pins on your relay go to what. I learned the hard way, as you'll see later on in this video. First, let's establish which pins are what wire on the relay. Pin 87 is the power wire. This wire goes to your inline fuse, then to the positive side of the battery. Pin 30 is your power to the compressor. This wire goes to the positive side of the horn compressor. Pin 86 is your activation wire, like a switch or button. You can also hook this up to your stock horn to have steering wheel function, but refer back to Hornblasters' website as this video will not demonstrate this. Pin 85 is the ground for the relay. Most of these pins are 10 gauge wire, however, Hornblasters recommends using 16 gauge wire for pin 86, aka your switch wire. Finally, the small wire in this picture that's black and white is the ground wire for the compressor. Now that I've told you about which pins are wired to what, why did I tell you about the pins on the relay and not the colors of the wires? Well, there's actually two reasons I did this. Reason 1, it sets you up with more information to better your experience with wiring. Reason 2, I ended up having to do my own wiring due to having a couple failed attempts to wire this Hornblasters Dixie Horn.
It's time to find out if I did anything right. No? Still?
Why did this happen? Well, I'm used to third-party horn manufacturers and I ended up relying on that information during my install process as I had the color wires mixed up for locations. There's also a difference in the way that third-party horns are wired. Third-party horns like my old Dixie Horn has pin 86 jump to pin 30, which means the circuit is way different from the circuit that we're making today. I started on the wrong foot and I just wanted to say thank you to Hornblasters customer support as they were able to help me with the install. It is up to you if you want to use your own wires or if you want to use the quick connect wires. But I found it was easy to make your own wires as the quick connect harness wires were too short for my application, but it could be different from your situation. Let's look for a spot for your relay that will be close to your horn compressor, that way we don't accidentally make wires too long or too short. For me, I have a perfect spot for my relay to go where it's next to my compressor. Let's start wiring the relay by doing simple pins first, like grounding. To find a ground, I personally like to look at the frame of the vehicle and find if there's any spots close to your relay and compressor that is metal and already has a bolt. It's important for the bolt to also be metal for a good connection. Why do I prefer if there's a bolt there already? I prefer having a bolt with my ground area because I like using a ring terminal to get excellent contact for a good ground. Grounding, if done wrong, is a majority of troubleshooting issues for electric horns. Another thing to ensure a good ground to prevent issues is to make sure the metal isn't rusty or dirty. You can use a degreaser and/or wire brush to clean the ground area if you want to be extra cautious. Now that we have found a ground, let's take both of our compressor ground wire and our pin 85 wire and let's use ring terminals to mount over the bolt and tighten the bolt down. The bolt needs to be hand tight. Over tightening the bolt can damage the terminals and make a bad ground. Now that our ground wire is in place, let's set aside the black and white wire as this will be plugged into the negative of the horn compressor later on when we mount it. Now take the next wire from the ground and plug it into pin 85. Let's now wire pin 87, the power wire, with the inline fuse. Whether you have to extend the wire or have enough wire that comes with the horn, you want to have the inline fuse next to the battery. In my case, I had to extend the wire, so ensure you use the appropriate gauge connectors and use shrink wrap to weatherproof your wiring. It's important to not hook up the ring terminal to the positive side of the battery just yet. This will be the very last step to ensure safety and to not damage the horn. Now we have two wires left. We have pin 30, which is the positive side of the horn compressor, and pin 86, which is the activation wire. I like to wire pin 86 last, so let's prep pin 30. Why do we have to prep pin 30? Well, when I say prep, I mean we're gonna need to figure out where we're mounting our compressor, as this will allow us to plug in pin 30 to the positive side of the compressor and plug in the small wire from the ground to the negative side of the compressor as well. This will set us up to complete the relay after wiring our switch or button, as well as making it easier to hook up the air lines to the compressor from the horns. Now it's under your discretion if you have a place you could bolt your compressor, drill out a spot for your compressor, or just zip tie your compressor. I was lucky enough to have a convenient spot to mount my compressor without drilling, but your application may vary. I personally try not to drill into my frame unless if I know that it's going to be permanent without messing with my future build. For example, my Uga horn from Hornblasters is mounted via zip ties, so really use whatever method you prefer. Once we have mounted our horn compressor, let's wire pin 30 from the relay to the positive side of the horn compressor using the same principles from before. Once that is done, don't forget about the black and white wire for the negative of the horn compressor. All we got left for the relay is pin 86, our activation wire, aka our switch or button. Here's where things can get tricky. We gotta find a rubber boot or something that is connected to your firewall that goes into the cab of your vehicle. We will have to feed wire into the cab. For example, I have this rubber boot that already has wires going through it, and I've already fed wires through myself. I was able to push aside this boot with a flathead screwdriver. The ultimate tip for feeding wire into your cab once you've found somewhere to feed into is taking the end of your wire and unfold a wire hanger and electrical tape the wire and hanger together. That way you have a bendable but firm small diameter of the metal hanger and feed it into your car. This process is different for everyone, so if you're having a hard time finding somewhere to feed wire, maybe give Google a try and see if anyone has any information on the best places to feed wire. Once the wire is fed into your cab, you can now figure out where your button or switch will go. This wire will be the positive for your switch. In most cases, you'll have a positive and negative, aka a ground wire, for most buttons or switches. Unless we have an LED rocker switch, then that will be more steps. But to cover the basics, you'll need to take the wire you fed into the cab and make it the positive for the switch. After that, let's find a good ground for the negative wire for the button or switch. Using the same grounding steps as before, all you need to do is wire it to the button or switch. There you have it, the relay is done, and now you have a wired button or switch. We now have all the wiring done, and what's left is just mounting the 5 horns and connecting the air lines to the compressor. When you look at the horns, you'll notice that there's numbers on top of them as well as on top of the compressor. Before we start hooking up the lines, we kind of got to figure out where to mount the horns. Luckily, I promised you a cheap and professional looking way to install your horns without needing to drill into your vehicle. So here's my secret. I use a broom holder as a mount for my horns. Now this is a super cheap and adjustable way to mount your horns. I got mine from Ace Hardware, but I'm sure there's similar models that will work too. You'll need to match the horns to the compressor using the tubes that came with the Dixie Horn. I recommend lining up the horns from tallest to shortest on your work area and taking notes of which horn is what number. That way it helps with the install and you have that information if something happens in the future. This is where I'm going to say, I love you, Hornblasters. They go above and beyond and provide clamps that fit over the air lines so you can secure it to the base of the horns and horn compressor. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to replace my air lines on older setups because the harsh weather degraded the lines to the point they just slipped off. Now this is where I messed up without even knowing. I was so happy to see that Hornblasters included plenty of long airlines. I thought they just simply weren't cheaping out like their competition. Little did I know, it's because Hornblasters recommends keeping the airlines the same length for the best sound. And I'm over here trimming the airlines. Yeah. Yet another mistake from cheaper horn experiences. Luckily, the Hornblasters team said my horns sounded just fine, even with the trimmed airlines. But chances are, if you're watching this video all the way through, you might have a better sounding horn than me. It's okay, I'd rather take the mistakes so you don't have to, and I wouldn't change anything about that. Once you have the horns prepped with the airlines, I recommend installing one horn at a time. Style points if you go biggest to smallest horn. I personally think that looks the best. Spoiler alert, even having notes, I was somehow tired enough to still get 2 of my horns in the wrong spots. Now here's the clip so you can laugh at me. With that being said, do this process with all 5 horns, then you are ready to test the horn. Take the positive wire with the relay and gently put it on the post of the positive side of the battery. If everything is wired right, you should be able to bolt it down snug but not tight. And if it works, congrats! You just brought the Dixie Horn to life. If it doesn't, don't panic, just recheck the grounds, wires, and the fuse. In worst case, Hornblaster support team is top notch, they got me sorted out. This horn is definitely better than my older Dixie Horn, but if you want to see the two face off against each other, watch this video.